Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you back from lunch and to this session on the digitization of international carbon market transactions. My name is Max McGrath-Horn. I'm Chemonics International's Senior Climate Finance Advisor. And I'm joined by an excellent group of experts here on the topic today who I'll introduce in a moment. But I want to take a few minutes to introduce the topic. We're here organized by Tech Change, so thank you to Tech Change and to all the other speakers and panelists before us. But we've covered a lot of topics already in the conference today, and there are a lot more diverse topics to be discussed in the coming panels and days. So I want to make sure that we start this topic with an introduction to what are carbon markets. I mean, what are we talking about? And I think many of you will already know some of the content I'm going to go over, but I'll move kind of quickly through it just to level set and make sure we have a common understanding of the tool that the carbon market is to help us, A, address climate change, reduce emissions, but B, also how, in particular, nature-based carbon credits transacted in carbon markets can be a phenomenal tool for driving community development and community-level impact. And I want to make sure we're keeping the conversation today really centered on that idea of what the impact of these markets and these tools are. So that when we start talking about digitization and blockchain and these lofty concepts, that we're always remembering that what's at the center of this conversation is impact. So the carbon markets, again, it's a tool. It gets a lot of publicity, and I think people have different perspectives, some positive and some negative. But at the end of the day, all that it is a tool for driving the impacts that we're looking for. And it's the transaction of carbon credits. A carbon credit is a representation of the avoidance or reduction or sequestration of 1 ton of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide equivalent gases. And we package that in the carbon market into a carbon credit, which corporations or countries or individuals can use to offset their emissions and help to meet their climate pledges. Carbon markets are growing really fast because a lot of countries, driven primarily by the Paris Climate Accord, but also corporations, have made these pledges on how they're going to meet their climate goals and contribute to addressing climate change. So I want to also just ask the organizers, our clock isn't going, so I'm not able to monitor carefully our time. So if I go over time, it's because we're still at, thank you, perfect. Right, so the objective of the carbon markets is to help people meet their goals. We have to keep in mind when we're thinking about offsets that the most important aspect of addressing climate change is the rapid and drastic reduction of real emissions from supply chains and from government action. So what we're talking about is a tool to offset those hard to abate or difficult to abate remainder emissions. And also in the interim, while companies primarily and also governments are working on reducing their emissions, we need to give them an interim way to contribute to climate change while they're working on the difficult task of reducing emissions from their supply chains. So this is a great tool, like I said. Anna Milena Plata, who I'll introduce in a moment, is going to talk to us about what these projects actually look like and how they're set up and how they drive community impact. But the last thing I'll do before I turn it over is I want to address that there are some challenges still in the market. And a big challenge is traceability of these credits. So they get packaged, there are international standards, and really all of this mechanism, all this infrastructure of the carbon markets is improving a lot, but there are still significant challenges. And so one way we may be able to address some of these challenges could be through the application of some advanced tech, which we'll also get into today, and is, I think, why folks here and online are interested in this topic at the Frontiers of Digital Development Forum. We're going to show a quick video now. It's just 2 minutes. I think you'll find it interesting. It shows a carbon credit project that was set up with USAID funding and led by Chemonics International. It's called Paramos and Forests, this activity. And this should give you a flavor, if you could please load the video, of what these projects can look like, and then I'll introduce the panelists. Thank you.
La madera ha sido parte de mi vida desde que yo era niño. Aquí todo es la madera, todo, todo, todo. Las embarcaciones, las casas, la economía, todo es de la madera. Cuando yo era cerrador, cuando miraba para arriba, a los palos, miraba era madera. Directamente ahora digo, bueno, ese palo captura tanto de carbón. De aserrador a ser representante, mi lucha es conservar. Yo nunca imaginé que conservar era más rentable que talar.
First expert speaker, Ana Milena Plata Fajardo. We're really excited to have Ana here. She's come from Bogota to join us for this panel. She's the CEO of Biofix, which is a Colombian organization that supports and develops carbon projects, nature-based carbon projects, which she'll tell us a bit about. She's also the president of an organization of carbon stakeholders in Colombia called Aso Carbono, which is a really important industry learning initiative that you may mention as well. Ana holds a PhD as well in forestry economics, which I think is so cool. And I couldn't be more excited to have you here, Ana. So please, over to you.
Thank you, Mas. And thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here to share a panel with you guys. For those who are not related with carbon project development, I would like to mention how to generate credits with carbon project. So according to Verra, the largest certified program, which is represented by Benoit here, there are many ways to generate credits. One of them is, for example, by improving agriculture procedures, by planting new trees, by doing energy efficiency, by forest conservation projects. So what Biofix does is the last one, is forest conservation projects, or RED Plus project is like the technical term for this kind of project. RED Plus means reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation. Biofix does these projects in collected territories, in indigenous communities and Afro communities in Colombia and also in Brazil. So I would like to mention some of the steps or the main steps to generate a carbon credit from RED Plus project. The first one is to identify the forest property. For those who doesn't know, the largest forest land owners in Colombia are the indigenous communities and the Afro communities. They hold the 65% of the land forest in Colombia. That this is about 32 million hectares of forest. So the good thing is that they have these well-designed property rights. So this is important for the point of view of certification, because there are not overlap with other kind of property like private property or even the government property. So the second step is to design and implement strategies for controlled deforestation, like planting trees, new trees, or strengthening forest governance, among others. Next step is to hire a validation and verification entity who will audit the project. Next step is to certify and register the project, and especially the carbon credits obtained from the project, in a platform. So one carbon dioxide removed or reduced is equal to one carbon credit. So this is important to mention. And finally, is the last step is to sell the carbon credits. So that's why some certified programs like Vera or some other programs around the world are creating like this digital technology to easy translate or commercialize the carbon credits. So in Biofix we have 10 RED Plus project or 10 forest conservation projects in Colombia and in Brazil that involves around 25 communities. And these projects have generated around 17 million carbon credits. And some of our achievements are the community involved in the project have been hiring around 1,000, have been created about 1,000 new jobs. The communities involved in the project invest their resources that they receive with the sale of carbon credits in, for example, solar panels, in, for example, drinking water system, in internet connections. So the important thing here is that what we do is not just for climate benefit, but also we focus on the social impact of these projects and how to improve the quality of life of this community. So summarizing, we are working on 1,300,000 hectares in Colombia, and we have generated 17 carbon credits that are being sold on carbon market, especially in the voluntary carbon markets. And I would love to talk more about the impact of these projects on the community, but I don't have too much time to do that. But if you want to know more about it, I will happy to talk with you when the panel is done.
Thank you, Ana Milena. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, the fact that these projects are predicated on having a climate impact, and that's built in and needs to be very carefully designed and verified. But that the other side of that is that it's channeling this really incredible amount of finance into communities so that they can do climate resilient development. And we're thinking about the climate adaptation as well. That's really, I want to keep us centered there as we move forward now and talk about the digital aspects of this. But to kick us off with that, I'll introduce our second panelist, Benoit Clement, who comes to us from Vera, which, as Ana Milena mentioned, is a US-based nonprofit organization that runs one of, or perhaps the largest and most well-known certifier and provider of methodologies for these projects. and Benoit is the Director of Financial Innovation at Vera. So we're really excited to have him here and to hear his perspectives and the organization's perspectives on integrating blockchain and other digital technologies into these markets. Benoit.
Thank you for having me, Max, and thank you to the organizers for putting this on. There's a lot of opportunities that we see when we look at potential digital applications to the voluntary carbon markets. When we look at blockchain being a tool that can be used to increase transparency as well as the efficiency of transactions, there are a lot of different ways that we can look at how that could be applied. Similarly, tokenization could potentially allow for new kinds of product applications to take place. When we were to look at blockchain, there could be some interesting applications in, as Ana Milena had mentioned, the digital monitoring, reporting, and verification of these projects. Vera puts out these methodologies that will all fall under a particular standard, and if there were an approach where methodologies were to be codified or digitized in a manner that can link up with these digital monitoring, reporting, and verification systems, there could essentially be data flows that are moving into those systems to help with the validation and verification of those projects. This streamlining of data, of information, can accelerate those processes and allow for the validation and verification to take place in a much more efficient manner, hopefully reducing costs, and by reducing costs, eliminating or reducing financial barriers for new communities, new project developers to come into the market to allow for a greater scaling of investment into climate action and sustainable development. It's a unique role that carbon project developers, I think, are going to be facing now and into the future, having this position of not only having to be really talented in operations and logistics that you find under project management, but to also be intimate with the standards that they're working with themselves, the particular methodologies they're looking at deploying with the projects that are on the ground, but then also to be data managers, to understand how these DMRV systems can connect to the methodologies, establishing those systems on the ground. And this is also, largely needs to be mimicked in terms of skill sets and human capital on the auditor side. So these systems, there's also this interesting opportunity where, depending on how those systems are created, there could be frameworks, guidance built within the systems themselves that allow for validation logic to actually nudge project developers and auditors to develop projects in a way that is minimizing the amount of friction and communication that is currently being experienced in the market, where there's a lot of back and forth communication happening between various standards bodies, the project developers and the auditors themselves. There's submission of project documents, et cetera, and when there is not an alignment on the quality or the requirements that the standards and methodologies put forth, it requires a lot more back and forth communication. And this is where DMRV, digital monitoring, reporting, and verification, can allow for greater harmonies of the requirements of the methodologies themselves and the projects that are on the ground. So blockchain could be, an interesting vehicle for having that information move through, perhaps in a more efficient manner, also potentially creating some transparency that we're not currently experiencing in the same way. At the same time, when we look at tokenization, there are also some interesting applications for that. Tokenization could potentially unlock product opportunities that we're currently seeing, such as fractionalization of carbon credits. If we could actually break up, a single carbon credit could represent anywhere between 1 ton to an infinite amount of tons of carbon. But if you were able to break up that carbon credit into smaller pieces and be able to, for example, embed that into products at every step within a value chain, you could effectively find a way to internalize environmental costs into products moving forward into the future. Another interesting aspect of tokenization is the potential to create an intelligent asset, moving from this sort of the current format where, carbon credit is largely a PDF. If you were to move it into this more intelligent asset format where you could actually create different kinds of call functions that would create new categories, new asset classes, new pools or bundles of these more fungible commodities, you'd be able to perhaps facilitate greater liquidity and trading within the markets. You'd be able to create new abilities for price discovery and create greater market confidence, perhaps. So we're seeing lots of different interesting opportunities in that respect. And, we started about 15 years ago, Vera, and, where we are today, we're rapidly trying to digitize a lot of our processes. We have our processes and then also our forms, the documents that we require of projects in the process of being digitized. There's going to be a lot of efficiency enhancements in the coming quarters that are going to be launched that we're really excited about. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting space to be in. There's plenty of opportunity, and it's exciting to see how we're going to be able to continue scaling investment into climate action, sustainable development through these, these new and emerging tools.
Thanks, Benoit. And I want to point out to everybody, if you're interested in following up on these topics, Benoit has put out a series, and Vera and his colleagues have put out a series of public consultations that kind of go through their thought process as they're evolving their thinking about how to use digital technologies. And I, of course, personally have been following along, but you can as well. I think that there are some resources available online that are really interesting, and I think it's a credit to Vera and to the process in general how transparent Vera has been in disclosing their thinking along every step of the way. So there's cool resources available online. Our last panelist is Fernando Malman, and I'm, again, really excited to have him here because he brings a different perspective, and I think a really interesting one that hopefully we'll get a lot out of here. Fernando is a serial entrepreneur, as he describes himself, and I think that really checks out from his bio. He's founded or co-founded several startups that deal with digital technology in the carbon space. And so he's really thought about the different opportunities that are out there and how to make them work. He is a partner in GSS Carbon, which I believe is the parent organization under which he's launched several technologies and solutions that he'll walk us through. But Fernando, we're really happy to have you here, so over to you.
Thank you for the invite, my pleasure. So we've been working, as Max mentioned, with two fronts in GSS. One is carbon, the other one is biodiversity, and of course how to merge those into one single cause or a single outlet, let's say. And what we've been doing with the digital markets is one thing that Benoit just brought up on how to embed those into apps and services people are already using. So we had the notion, of course, in the beginning where climate change was starting to be discussed, that you had to change pretty much every single habit you have in order for you to make an impact. And if everyone does their part, at some point in the future, we'll see that, this works. But I think humankind doesn't work like that. We need to see more immediate, more instant value on whatever we do. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're trying to bring forward in two different aspects. One, again, to make climate action more convenient, more meaningful, actually, embedding those services in digital banking apps, on-demand services apps, e-commerce platforms, so people can offset and do their part, other than only the companies offsetting all their emissions. The companies sometimes are not the actual owners of this, the technical owners of this emission, so there's a lot of room for people to do their part. The problem is how to give them tools to do so, and that's why we created APIs and several tech frameworks to do so. And for the accountability of these frameworks and how to use carbon credits and how to, of course, give back to the communities, as I said, this is something we've been working on, and it will be greatly enhanced by the use of blockchains, by the use of cryptos in the future, or tokenized digital, environmental assets in the future. So that's one part of what we've been doing, and I'm eager to discuss, of course, forward with you, but also on how to help companies do a more meaningful climate action on their part, how they can disclose better on how much actually they are emitting and how much their offsetting of their emissions, how to promote, of course, their impact in a more meaningful way, more transparent way. This has been a challenge not only for big companies that have all their sustainability teams, all their tech teams, their marketing teams, but of course how to help small companies to do the same. So first you need to understand how much or what's your impact on climate, and then you can move on to reduce or offset that part of it. So as Benoit mentioned, a carbon credit is pretty much 1 ton, formally 1 ton emitted of equivalent carbon dioxide. But an actual like taking a on-demand ride in an app or ordering online is a really small fraction of that, kilos or pounds of that. So how can I offset that rather than waiting for my whole year to develop and everything? So this is what we've been trying to tackle, and the use of blockchains and APIs and all this digital framework has been helping a lot. So in essence, we are trying to make climate action more convenient, not only for companies, but now for individuals using the tools, the apps, the platforms everyone is using, and how to do the back office, let's say, of these actions. It's one of the main difficulties we see now, and how to create better sustainable finance projects, let's say, using carbon as I guess, the basis for those tools. So that's what we've been doing, and trying to, of course, help everyone to do so with these tools.
Thanks, Fernando. That's just fascinating. You know, what can be done, and we're going to go to the structure of this talk. I'm going to now ask some structured questions to each panelists, and then we'll open it to audience Q&A. But I want to frame a little bit more, and I want to point out that in these markets, and especially when we're talking about introducing advanced technologies like this, there are so many stakeholders, and so we have to think about the impacts that something like this might have on a really diverse range of stakeholders, from a Fortune 500 company and its shareholders and employees, to the standard setters, to the governments, to the local NGOs, and all the way down to the folks who are, like Ana Milena was saying, actually reducing deforestation or planting trees in their communities and on their territorial lands. So when we think about digital technology, one of the big benefits is in terms of traceability, in terms of transparency, when we talk about blockchain for the markets. But it strikes me that, as in wrapping my head around all this, that what we're really talking about when we say traceability and transparency is we're talking about those actors in this ecosystem on the Fortune 500 end, or the market players end in the international carbon markets, where you need to have a certain level of understanding of how these systems work to receive the benefit of that increased transparency. And so I'm curious, Ana Milena, when you talk to the stakeholders at the community level who are really, again, at the center of this, the ones who are providing the climate mitigation impact, the ones who are in need of development finance from the sale of these carbon credits, how do you talk to them about digital technology and in international carbon markets, and what is their perspective on this topic?
Okay, thank you, Max, for the question. Well, digital technologies are already used since the carbon market globalizations, but it's interesting to know how there are an increased interest in integrate digital technology like the commodity with the transaction prices. And from the point of view of the community, I think this is a good idea, because the community can trace how much they sell the carbon credits. And also from the point of view of the government, is a good way to know how the prices are moving, and also for regulating and for taxes is good to know. It's a good source of information. If the digital platform reveal the transaction prices. And from the point of view of the developer, like me, there are not a consensus about if it's a good idea or if a bad idea to reveal the prices. In my personal opinion, I think it's a good idea because I prefer, or I would like to gain or to build trust with the community. And one of the ways to build trust in the community is to be totally transparency to the community. But I understand that there are other developers that perceive to reveal this information like sensitive information to reveal the prices. So it's not a consensus about if it's a good idea or a bad idea to reveal the transaction prices in a digital platform. As you know, well, ethnic communities have been historically misled by rubber industry, by logging industry, by mining industry. Even the government have forgotten them. So it's not a surprise when you talk with the communities about globalization and carbon market globalization that they are like warned about that. So I think this is a good way to build this trust, to reveal the prices. And also when we talk about tokenization carbon credits, is important to give the information in the more simple way, because these technical words and concepts are also difficult for the people who are working on that, for us, and it's more difficult when you translate this technology concept to a community. When the largest community in Colombia doesn't speak Spanish, or in Brazil doesn't speak Portuguese, that is the national languages, just speak native languages. So in native languages, carbon dioxide is not a concept. So now we have to introduce blockchain. Is the way we must do, because as I already know, we want to build this confidence. And talking about all the stakeholders, as you know, Colombia and Brazil, this year it was important because Colombia and Brazil just have elections, new presidents, president, governors, and Congress. And this new election have some, we need to wait for the government to understand this aspect, because we are like in a new climate policy. I mean, we passed from Republicans to Democrats, so we have to teach him about these terms. And I believe, and I am optimist about the auto regulation that makes the stakeholders. Being the president of the board of Azocarbono, we have some rules or ethic codes to follow, even if the government doesn't have regulation. And this is important because when you get some rules, we can identify who are the developers that are not following these rules. So to summarize, from the point of view of the community, I think that tokenization is a good idea, but following if we can meet the some of aspects. So first of all, if the community gain a fee when each token is transferred. This is the first conditions. I think that the community will think is positive that if they gain like a fee every time a token is transferred in the platform. And the second condition is to establish a clear mechanism of synchronize the on-chain registry with the off-chain registry. I mean, to synchronize the registry where the carbon credits were issued with the registry where the carbon credits are sold. So those are my inputs about that, about how the community will benefit with tokenization if we improve and we take into consideration these two conditions.
Thank you. I want to give Fernando an opportunity to kind of address some of that. I want to just point out to all of us, we have about 15 minutes left, so we'll move a little bit more quickly through our next two questions to get to audience Q&A. But Fernando, I mean, Ana Milena has now raised some considerations, for how technologies like you were developing under GSS Carbon could work with blockchain and also make sure. So, I mean, you need to be returning additional financial benefit. There needs to be a reason for the communities to want to engage in these technologies, basically. How would you go about making sure that's the case?
Yeah, so I think the communities actually will benefit with blockchain, for instance, and we're talking about blockchain, but there's loads of technical and technological frameworks that can be used. But people associate a lot, of course, the use of blockchains as an environmental impact it brings forward. But the double counting, let's say, of carbon credits, for instance, it doesn't only enable, it will actually enable companies to receive on a more transparent way, companies and of course communities, because of course if you want a fee, for instance, that's been discussed, a fee for communities, let's say, to actually get back to the community, you cannot be using the same credit twice, 3 times. So this is an effort that will far, in my opinion, offset the actual impact of the use of technologies like blockchains. So we have, I think when we talk about blockchains, people immediately think on cryptos, like crypto coins, and of course this is just a small fraction of what can be used on blockchains, and the carbon market, in my opinion, is actually the original, can actually benefit on the original side of building blockchains, a better distribution, a better accountability, and of course breaking down this, or at least making other environmental services able are available for companies to use, or of course landowners and communities to do so. So biodiversity is becoming more viable to take this into a token and environmental services as a whole, and putting carbon credits inside this token. So there's a lot of new ways to use that, and of course everyday climate action for people includes, of course, accountability and traceability.
So to quickly summarize what you're saying, if I understand correctly, the efficiencies that can be introduced into these systems mean that overall more benefit is derived from the projects themselves, because we're not double counting and we're not going through like bad traceability processes that result in losses. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, sure.
Benoit, I have kind of a broad question for you, and I was hoping before we turn it over to the audience for questions that you could give us your perspective on like what is the next, not the immediate future, what is the next 10, the next 15, next 20 years? What are the big opportunities in digitization of carbon credits that we're not ready for but maybe coming to, and how do you as an individual or you as Vera think through getting us to that place?
That's a really exciting question. Maybe I'll answer personally. 10, 15 years from now, I'd love to see digital applications that allow for greater accessibility and participation at the community level. It'd be really fantastic. This reminds me of a trip I had just 2 summers ago. I was working on developing a pilot program in East Africa. This was when I had my own startup, and we were trying to do regenerative agroforestry development through the issuance of microloans, and we wanted to use a mobile application to allow for those farmers to apply for that. They had, in the most remote areas, they had Android phones in clay dwelling units that they had created by hand in an area with no roads, no infrastructure, no municipal sewage or grid or anything, but they had solar panels that they were able to charge these androids on. And at the same time, they were in some ways more advanced using these digital cashless systems, sending, funds back and forth between each other. And I think if they're able to do that out here in this incredibly remote area, why couldn't they also be participating in the digital monitoring, reporting, and verification of projects in those areas? Why couldn't they also be the recipients of those carbon credits? Could they potentially be project developers, verifiers, auditors, everything, right from their phones, opening up citizen science and participation and accessibility at a scale that we have never seen before, I think is a really exciting place where perhaps 10, 15 years from now, the technology, how all the information is going to flow, and the human capital to support that would exist. I think that that's something where getting everybody on board for climate action and sustainable development is something that is feasible through these tools. I think when we kind of look at where we are now, I think there's a hopeful trajectory that could lead us in that general direction. Collaboration is absolutely key, and like you mentioned, we hold a lot of public consultations at Verra. We're closing this one tomorrow on figuring out how we might approach third-party tokenization. We're trying to learn as much as we can from our public peers, and I think these are stepping stones in that general direction, is looking at how can we all come together, collaborate, not silo and fragment ourselves, but instead come together, find a way to be more inclusive, more participatory. And I think that's where a lot of these technologies will ultimately and hopefully lead us.
I think that's a really great segue, and obviously we could go, I think, down that rabbit hole for a long time. But I'll see now if there's any questions from the audience here in person or online. I think we have one here in the front to the organizers.
Hi, thank you all. This is extremely interesting for us. I'm someone who comes from a background of working on conflict and conflict transformation, so I'm very new. This was all really educational for me. But I kept thinking, as you were all speaking, there's such potential here for good, but we are speaking about communities as one entity. Right? We speak about engaging with the community, opening up to the community, and so on. And we know the communities are people, and where you have lots of people, there will inevitably be some kind of conflict. How are we managing, how do we make sure that the work we're doing is not going to be creating more problems down the road within communities? If we're bringing resources into resource-scarce areas and resource-scarce communities, how are you doing it now to ensure that that benefit is really there for the entire community and not for certain individuals within the community more than others, but also, how do we do what you were talking about, Benoit, in a way that isn't going to exacerbate existing competition over scarce resources, basically?
Wow, I mean, that's you really hit the nail on the head. It's such an important question, and it's why I think we tried to keep this whole conversation framed around community benefit, but you're right. I mean, communities are not homogeneous. We're talking about very diverse people in very diverse circumstances all around the world. I mean, there are projects in California, and there are projects in Tanzania. I think anyone here would make a really interesting answer to this question, but I'd like to turn it over to Benoit, because I think it's really Verra and the other standard setters who are putting forward methodologies that perhaps you could explain to us how those are derived and fit into, and I think Anna Milena also might be able to back up after you to talk about project development.
Yeah, I think at the project development side, it's definitely where they're having more touch points with those communities. It's been my experience, having had my feet in project development for multiple years for various industries and sectors. The success of projects, the longevity of them, largely hinges on the level of engagement that the community has in its decision making. when you're consulting with communities and finding out what benefits are important to them, what problems should be prioritized, and what solutions could be implemented to address those, that's where you get greater accountability within those communities. You get greater ownership and sense of pride. You're going to see those kinds of projects last way longer than ones where we come with this silver bullet solution, where we're only looking at this from one single angle. It's when you're engaging with these communities that you tend to find a more holistic, comprehensive understanding, and when you can take those considerations and develop solutions that consider them with those partners, and also have those communities be a part of the implementation, the execution, that's where I've noticed the greatest success generally comes from. But I'd love to hear Anna's perspective from being from the project development angle.
Okay, well, thank you for the questions, a good question. Well, certifies and the standards require benefit share mechanism to guarantee or ensure the meet of the social safeguards. So each project registered in BERA or in another standards are required to have this benefit share mechanism. How we do, how Biofix does is, we know that the conflicts arise when there is no money, but also the conflict arises when there is a lot of money. And in carbon market, there is a lot of money right now that they haven't seen before. So we are aware that conflicts arise when there is a lot of money, and we create a system, a financial vehicle system. We pay the community in a escrow account, and this escrow account have like a specific destination. And this specific destination have 4 actions. One of them is the strengthen governance. The other one is improve the initial needs, like, education, infrastructure, and health. The other one is monitoring deforestation and planting new trees or reforestation. And the last one is green businesses. So the first thing you have to do give it like a tool for them invest their own resources, because as Biofix does is the resources are from them. We don't use the resources or say in what they have to invest. They know they have to invest, they know, and they choose their suppliers for the investment. So that's why we guarantee that there is because they are autonomous in their investment. That's the way we guarantee. But of course there are conflicts. Of course we want the government to be more in the field, because there are conflicts when we talk about money, and also because the communities are. Is there an entity in Colombia? They have an ID, tax ID. So they work like a company. They have a president or a legal representative, and they have a board. So the board takes decisions. But the problems arise when the board is changed. And for indigenous people, the board changed each year. So sometimes the former president of the board doesn't explain to the new president of board this kind of thing, the financial vehicle. So the conflicts arise in this moment. But I think this is better than in Brazil, for example, that the president of the board of the indigenous people, like the name of cacique, or in Spanish cabildo, they don't have this official recognition by the state. So in Brazil, there is not like a paper that said, this is the real legal representative of the indigenous people. But in Colombia, we have. So this is something that I think Brasilia must work because it's difficult to understand who is in charge of this large amount of territory. And yes, I think this, I hope I answered your question.
I think you did a very good job. Thank you both. I'm conscious of the fact that we're at the top of the hour. We started a little late, so maybe the organizers could let us know if we have time for one more question.
Yeah, we have a question from online. So Grace in our virtual audience would like to know, are there any current blockchain-based pilots in this space, or is it still too early? If yes, what learnings have there been? And if no, what are the main obstacles to putting in place blockchain applications?
Thank you. Thanks for that question. And I think we have a perfect person to answer it over here in Fernando.
So yeah, we have many different projects. We have actually not only projects to tokenize credits. In essence, carbon credits are already a token in nature. They not always run inside blockchains, but there are many projects on crypto coins based on carbon credits. There are a lot of generators or project owners. They're already using their own blockchains to tokenize and waiting for standards, of course, to be blockchain based. So, again, there are a lot of the use of blockchains to generate offsets directly from the forest, not really turning into a formal carbon credit standardized by Vera or Gold Standard or CDM, the United Nations Clean Development Mechanism, to maybe turn this into a more popular thing or to use areas that can offset, for instance, a forest will only generate credits if you have pressure to cut it down. So usually that's the main source of carbon credits based on forests like REDD+, as Anna was describing. So the use of other reserves, natural reserves, for instance, on farming farming land or farmland or different kind of green belts around landfills, for instance. You can use that to offset directly, and many projects here in the US and Brazil are trying to do so. So that's the only way feasible and viable for you to account that 1 ton is being offset not only through a carbon credit, but a carbon token, let's say. And again, to put all other environmental services such as regeneration of agro land and other the cleaning of water sources. This can be also input in all the social aspects of it. This can all be inputted into a single token or various tokens. And the blockchain that is already in places in many, and again, many different let's say, projects. This is being used and will be definitely greatly enhanced and done in the near future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know did anyone else want to jump in with a story about a pilot, or we can ask for another question? Okay. If we may have time for one more, I'm not sure, but if we do, the organizers could pass the mic to someone or give us one from the internet. We have some question here. I'm not sure where our mic got off to. Is there someone with a microphone to pass to the gentleman here? We may have lost all of the organizers at this point.
Because I think it's time to...
Yeah, perhaps we need to wrap up then. There's no microphone for you, sir. I'm sorry. We can get your question after. I suppose I'll just say thank you to the panelists then and to the audience for participating so nicely. And we'll be around for a few minutes if you do want to ask any questions. Thanks.